welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today for this exciting exclusive knowledge series session where we will be talking about how to make your SAP applications fail proof. My name is Sayantan. I take care of channel marketing for AppDynamics for the APAC region. I will be your host for the day. Before we kind of start the session, I wanted to cover a few, basic pointers with you, which will help you throughout this session. So pointer number one is all your lines are muted and will stay muted during the session. Please drop in your questions in the question panel on the right hand side of the console. You can type in your question. We will try our best to kind of answer to your question by typing back the answers during the session. We have a 10 to 15 minute slot for the Q&A session. During that session, if you type in your question, we will try to answer those questions verbally. We have our expert joining in who will be answering to those questions. The second point is the team had announced an exciting, kind of a contest called Fail Proof SAP contest, where you were asked to submit your SAP related challenges. We have been really, receiving exciting entries there, and that's the reason we have decided to extend this contest. Now we will be extending this contest beyond this session. You will be, having a link in the chat window today, and also maybe after this session, where you can, put in your SAP challenge, and we will be awarding 5 top winners with this surprise gift. They will be intimated by email after this session. So we urge you to kind of submit your entries during the session or after the session using the link in the chat window. It is a Google form, and it will be a restricted access Google form where the entry will only stay with us. The third point is we will be sending you a feedback survey after this session is over. We'll request each one of you to kindly fill that feedback survey form so that we know how this session went and what all improvements we can do in the future. You will also get an opportunity to kind of schedule a exclusive one-on-one meeting with our experts using that feedback survey. So again, welcoming you all. With that, I would like to kind of introduce our speakers for the day. Rajesh, if you can go to the, yeah. So we have with us Abhijit Bhaskar joining us from Cisco AppDynamics. Abhijit takes care of pre-sales and solution engineering for the channels business in India. We also have Jody Nicholas joining us from AppDynamics. Jody takes care of solution engineering for AppDynamics for the APAC region. We have Rajesh Muralidharan joining us from QualityKiosk. Rajesh heads the performance assurance team at QualityKiosk, and he will be, taking part in this session, taking care of the QualityKiosk part of the session. With that, I will hand it over to Rajesh to take over this session. Welcome, Rajesh.
Thank you, Santan. Thank you for the introduction and thank you for the words. Thank you all for joining this webinar and take your time out joining me, Abhijit and Jody in this webinar on fail proofing your SAP systems. A quick walkthrough into the today's agenda on performance management of SAP applications. So basically, we will be going through the topic of how to build business resiliency into the SAP applications by ensuring that performance is inbuilt and we are improving the uptime for a long-term SAP applications. We'll also be talking about introducing performance in the long term in the software lifecycle, and also seeing how application monitoring in production can help in this context. After that, Abhijit and Jody will be taking us through the AppDynamics solution of end-to-end SAP monitoring, followed by a live demo, and talking about a couple of case studies, and then, like Santan said, 10 to 15 minutes Q&A session. So that's what we have packaged in this 1 hour of webinar today. Moving forward on the performance management for SAP applications. This topic of performance management and how to build the business resiliency is more of my personal experience of working with many SAP migrations, be it ECC migrations or newer implementations across the years, which I'll just try to collate and bring it and sharing some ideas on how to uh, go live without any performance issues, and even after going live, how to ensure that we are able to sustain that performance and scalability. To ensure performance resiliency, the application, as we all know, needs to be performant, which needs to be scalable, needs to be reliable. So, how does the world see SAP ERP systems today? As we are seeing in this particular slide, we see that there is a notion or a perception that ERP systems like SAP are a bit slow across all the global deployments which we see there. When we say slow, it is that when users are trying to access the application, it might be there is a perception of slowness which are there, or reports might get slowly, which are slow to get downloaded or upload, not able to see the reports. How do we ensure that this doesn't happen when in the case of our SAP deployments, and how do we ensure that we are in the not in the red side of the table, but we are on the right side, and seeing that we are able to have a better customer experience for our users, and that is what we will be covering in this webinar. Over the years, we all know that SAP systems have been the backbone of organizations, wherein any downtime or any issues which are there in terms of performance will have a negative impact. These issues can be as small as minimal issues. For example, some of the functionality is not working, or it can be that the response times are a bit slow, causing some customer experience or customer service issues. Or it can even happen to a larger scale issue wherein the revenue is we are losing revenue, or we have been using customer data losses happening. Finally, which is leading to irrevocable impact on our organization's reputation. How do you ensure that these things do not happen, and how do we ensure that we are when we are deploying or migrating into SAP, or even or doing an SAP upgrade, moving into the cloud? Some of our customers are moving into the cloud on SAP. How do we ensure that we are able to improve the performance and bring in more reliability in it? While we talk about that, I would also want to say that my customers also ask me, SAP is such a big software company. It is a COTS application. It's a commercially over the shelf application. So isn't it supposed to be working or being performant and scalable in terms of the various user load which is there? The answer is yes. The application which I have seen in my experience is that the SAP base application is quite performant. It scales to a large number of users, but the complication is added wherein we get into customization into SAPs. We know that almost 90% plus above deployments of SAP are actually customized. So that brings in the complexity. Second is the hardware and the network infrastructure which has been deployed on which the SAP is running. That also plays a major role. Third can be the data, because as we continue using our data over a period of time, the database increases, the volume increases, and that also can cause issues. And finally, it can also happen that the interactions, because SAP systems today don't work as a standalone. They also interact with other systems in the IT infrastructure. So that interaction, how does that also happen? And all these things have to work in tandem. And that is what maybe is impacting the SAP. So while SAP, the base application is quite performant and scalable, that is where the complexity comes in. So to talking about business resilience, first we have to ensure that as in case of any disaster which happens, we need to have business continuity. Second is we in case we also need to know that how fast can we come back into the normal state. So that we have to ensure that we are having a performant and a reliable application. To improve the performance reliability of an application, we need to know which are the major moving parts in production. For any application, what we have seen is these are the four major moving parts which are there, especially in an SAP system. Starting with the application itself, wherein we're talking about the ABAP code, the RFC code, or the database, the SQLs, the store procedures, including the data which is residing in the database, the master and the transaction data. As this data, as I mentioned earlier, as this data increase, it can have a negative impact. Then second is the hardware resources. How is the hardware? How is the hardware in working? On which the infrastructure on which the SAP is working? How are they deployed? What is the network resource? How are the network resource being configured? Because these SAP systems have to interact with the other systems. So the data has to be transferred. And finally, the client side code, which decides on the customer or the end user's browser or the mobile. This is basically applicable for systems like SAP Web or NetViewer or Fiori kind of applications, which runs on the browser and not more on the GUI. But high level, these are the four major moving parts which we need to control, which we need to ensure that we are able to make the application more performant and how do we do that? How do we ensure that we are able to control it? Even if we know that these are the four parameters which are there, the answer would be simple. We need to measure and optimize. We need to measure all the four parameters which are there, all the sub parameters within their four parameters, and see and improve it. But it's easy to say that we just need to measure and we need to optimize. How do we measure, and how do we know that even if we measure, is it good, bad, or ugly? The answer is that we need to get into something called the non-functional requirements. Technically, non-functional requirements would be anything and everything to do about an SAP application which is not related to functionality of an application. While in plain English, it can be the answers to these questions. Some of these, for example, how long should it take for a customer to log in? Or how much time should a dialog step take to execute? How much time should I wait after I fire my T code? How much time should I take to get a report kit to download it? So, and I have an answer. This is the threshold which is there. So that becomes an NFR. So NFR in a simplistic way is the response time and the time it takes to ensure that this is how. While we have the response time acceptable time which is there, we'll also will have to ensure that this production data which is coming. So if it is not a greenfield application, we can take the data from production and saying, okay, this is my NFR currently, this is my baseline, and I need to improve it. I need to continuously improve. Or I can have a industry benchmark and saying this is my industry benchmark for these response times. Or I can have an organization benchmark and saying that for my SAP application, this is the time taken for a dialog step, this is the time taken for a report. So it can be varied. So that's the basic idea basic input which we need to do. Once we have this, we need to then manage and see that with the NFRs, like I said, right from the response time of an end-to-end response time of a customer logging in, hitting the login button and waiting for the next page, or the dialog steps, or the ABAP code to execute, or the RFC to execute. It can be n number of steps. So right from the highest level of saying that I need to do PO creation, right from the login to PO creation to log out. So what should be the entire customer journey response, or going to a dialog step, or going to the level of ABAP or SQL execution. NFRs can get into all these levels. It can also include what should be my CPU utilization. So once we have these NFRs, the non-functional requirements are there, we need to manage it. How do we manage it? Management of NFR is basically widely done in these three buckets. We can call testing, engineering, and monitoring. While the words looks easy, understandable, it's basically English. Testing is basically how do we break the system, and while breaking the system, we monitor and see that if the application is able to sustain the NFR thresholds. And engineering is making and tuning the application so that the application is able to reach and is able to function within the thresholds. And monitoring is to ensure that we are able to create a visualization dashboards or visualization of all the components which we just saw earlier in the earlier slide. All the components, right from the customer journey and to the last SQL execution which is happening. How do you ensure and visualize all these different moving parts and see that which are the components which are not meeting the NFR threshold, or in case it is there, we are able to go back and fix it. So these are the three major buckets of NFR management. Getting into the testing side of it, basically performance testing or scalability testing or reliability testing for reliability is normally done on a non-production environment. The reason we do it on a non-production environment is because we don't want to get into data security or data corruption issues. while I talk about doing it in non-production environments, so it has to be a lower environment like a staging environment or a DR environment or any other environment. The recommendation is that we have to do it on hardware, on an environment which has a hardware of at least 50% of production. So while that can be ranging about to 40 to 50%, the software layer, the build, the application version, etc., has to be exactly the same as what is in production. Or what will happen is if we have a major deviation saying that I have only 10% or 20% of hardware, or my OS version is different as compared to production, or my application version is different, then there is a huge error in the test results. And we don't want to end up in a situation wherein we are spending so much of time, effort, and money into doing the testing and saying that finally they're saying that the results will not match or will not hold true in production. So we have to be as close to as in production in terms of hardware and this architecture. But in the software, there is no compromise. It has to be exactly the same version and build which is being done. Second layer also would be the data. When I talk about data, database version and everything, it has also talk about the data which is residing in the database. Because I can do a test on a zero volume data and get excellent results, but then that will not hold true in production. So we have to have the data which is almost exact copy of production. The data can be masked for security reasons, but the volume has to be comparable to production. And see what is the results we are getting. Once we identify these issues, then we are able to fix it and move it in. When I talked about having an environment of 50% hardware, so is it that without that 50% hardware environment, we will not be able to do anything? The answer is no. We can even start doing activities even in a development environment or a UAT environment. In my experience, normally SAP systems, SAP applications have around 5 to 15% of UAT, which is 5 to 15% of production. So we can start in the development environment, we can start in the UAT environment. And in the UAT environment, we can start small by doing a low volume testing. When I say low volume testing, it can be for a single user, or it can go up to 10 to 25 users, depending on the capability and capacity of UAT system. So while a single user can be done manually, to get maximum ROI of this activity, we would recommend to use tools, load testing tools, so that in case we are able to do more business transactions testing. Second is we are also able to increase the concurrent users to say 10, 25 or whatever the UAT system can handle based on its CPU operation memory and the hardware usage. So the benefit of doing this is that even at a low volume, we will be able to identify what is the time it takes to for a particular dialog step to execute. Or if when I click on when I fire a particular T code, how many SQLs are getting fired in the backend in the database. If there are too many SQLs that are getting fired, we know this is a potential performance issue which might come up and which might be got caught in the performance testing later, or maybe even get the customers might face in production. So why not capture it today, right now in the UAT system itself, fix it, and then so that we are having a lesser time to do the actual performance test and there is no performance issue in production. That's the idea of doing the testing early, right from the development stage or in the UAT stage.
Rajesh will request you to expedite a bit.
Sure. So while we were also are on a lower environment right now, so we might not even look at the hardware usage which are currently, because the UAT box will be a smaller box, so we might only talk about the areas which we need to see in terms of dialog steps and the SQL response times or the store processes. Once we do this, we can move into the performance, the larger volume performance side of it, and then and see that the application is going live without any performance issue once it is serviced. But do it only once? No. That is why we said that it has to be done in blocks. We have to build the performance and also sustain the performance. Each and every release which is going live has to be tested the same way we talked about. But here we can have a smaller environment. Before we go live, for example, in UAT, after all the tuning is done, we can take a 25% of the actual load and whatever the UAT capacity is there, do it, and then for each release, we can do this smaller test in the UAT box today and compare it with the earlier baseline which we had built in the build performance stage. And then we compare it. And then if there is a 5% or 10% deviation of the NFS, then we can stop there, optimize, and then we go. So that is how we will build and sustain the performance. While we talk about the three layers of managing the NFR, the testing, engineering, and monitoring. So the last stage is monitoring. So we talk about SAP monitoring. SAP monitoring or the production monitoring, we all know that why it is important. Production monitoring by default is a must. But why is SAP different? Because we will have benefits of for IT, we'll have business benefits also in terms of improving customer experience or taking informed decisions. But what about SAP? SAP is different because each and every land of deployment of SAP is becoming more and more complex. Like we said, it is interacting with multiple systems. It is talking to some systems in the cloud. In these systems might even be placed at different places across the globe. How do we ensure that these smooth transactions are happening? And and in case something happens, unforeseen incident happens in production, how do we ensure that we are able to capture those data and bucketize into and say that okay, this is a severity 1 issue, this is a severity 4 issue, and we respond accordingly, because we don't want and should not be responding to all kinds of incidents in the same manner. So there has to be a difference there. So that is how we will be able to reduce the impact in case something happens in production. We are also able to reduce it and ensure that this business resiliency built in. And I would want to go back a couple of years, some years back, wherein when we used to do performance engineering for SAP, we used to fire some T codes like we mentioned here. And this is for example for a manufacturing giant which we had done, and identifying what is the response time for each of the dialog steps, where is the time spent in the database, and then moving into the AWS logs if it is Oracle, going back into the SAP system to get the execution logs. This is all manual. So for each and every dialog step, you need to do it manually. And then we had the solution manager which came in from SAP suite. So some of us, we don't know about solution manager. This is a more of a enterprise management suite which helps to identify, fix, and also reduce the risk on SAP systems. Solution manager, even though it is very good and it gives it in a single screen, it is still restricted only to the SAP system. It does not it does not interact with the other systems which is there in the system. And also there is no business context to it. So this is where we have to talk about the new age, modern application monitoring tools, especially for SAP. And when I talk about an SAP application monitoring tool, we have to ensure that there are areas which we will talk about unified, where it is not a SAP and non-SAP integrations which are happening. Second is it has to be intelligent, because there will be so many alerts which are coming in, and there should be a correlation, and then how do we do that? And automated, it should be automated because the response time and the root cause analysis have to be done automatically, and it should have the capability of not only monitoring this particular way, but also all layers of software and hardware, and it has to be useful across all the entire life cycle, right from pre-migration, post-migration, and also during the migration of an SAP application. While I'm not getting too much into the monitoring stages, we have experts like Abhijit and Jody waiting for their demo and their deck. I would want to hand it over to you, and that's all from my side. Abhijit, I would want you to take it forward, and thank you all for your time and your patient hearing, and hope I was able to throw some light into the ways of building and sustaining performance and reliability in the SAP application. Thank you.
Thanks, Rajesh. So thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. So we are talking here about the AppDynamics, how AppDynamics can help for the SAP, right? So we all know that SAP is the market leader in ERP. That's right. Let me stop this. Yeah, sorry for that. So we are talking about the SAP. So we all know that SAP is the majorly used software across every other business, right? So when I talk about the business, so there is no single business which is not touching the SAP or SAP application, and every other transaction which is going through the SAP, right? So Rather, even Gartner estimate that there are 77% of all the worldwide business transactions some or other way touching the SAP systems. And with this, the environments being so large and complex, the responsibility of to manage these SAPs inside any organization, it comes to the only one thing. And that is nothing but the basis team, which is responsible to administrate the SAP landscape, troubleshoot any issue. If it is there in the production hours or non-production hours, they are the complete responsible to handle those production P1 issues and fix it. So one of the difficulties what we see is historically is that SAP is a complete in silos tool, right? And another challenge is that we see that customer facing a major customers are having a push on the migrating the S4 with a new SAP version, that is S4 HANA version, right? And while migrating this, they have to perform this migration activity while their SAP is still running in the production. And so the basis team who is responsible to maintain this, they have to still manage the show that while they are supporting their day-to-day activities, right? So with this environment being in large, what happens is that whenever the basis team is trying to connect with this SAP landscape, you will not able to see that complete end-to-end visibility, right? So yeah. So when we are establishing these SAP basis team challenges, right, that they are not having the end-to-end visibility, and they are not only the application which is supporting that particular business, right? Or rather, your business is not something which is SAP as a core business. Rather, SAP sits underneath or next to your any application or your frontline or the order portal application or any business application, and it keeps integrating with those services where every other team has to work on it, right? And there is a DevOps team and the basis team which supports this in turn integrating these applications or this entire application which supports that business, where they have to monitor the systems and pinpoint where exactly the root cause, right? Now not only this technical team, there is one more team which also monitors overall this overall application system, and that nothing but the business team. The business team looking at the business metrics like revenue, orders, and the payments at any point of time. And at any point of time, if one of the metric is got impacted, they will ask few questions, and that particular question goes to either basis team or the DevOps team. Like, what is the reason that SAP is not working? Is that something as for migration, or is that something some transport which is got imported and for some business requirement, or is that something there is a new release has been rolled out to your non-SAP application on last Friday night or last weekend, right? So what is the reason behind this particular problem? And to identify this particular problem, what we refer in AppDynamics is that mean time to innocence. So how do you effectively manage this conversation between all these different type of teams and try to figure out where exactly we can look at the problem and what we can solve the problem? So while different groups are trying to look at the different tools to understand the cause of the issue, the cost of the outages are so huge. And it is estimated that every hour of downtime for a critical application, which can cost up to $500K or up to $1 million at any point of time. And there you can see that there is a need of a most efficient tool which can help you to come out of this kind of problems. So now let's look at it, how AppDynamics approaches these kind of challenges. First is that we provide a unified view that gives all the personas or all the people who are accessing this business system with the data and the information what they need. We provide the framework where you have the discussion and provide the evidence of how application performance is impacting the business results. And we are also helping all the groups to move away from the reactive state to proactive state by looking at the things in a single console. So we provide the out-of-box real-time dashboard with actionable data, and most important, this data can be analyzed by anyone, even not having the SAP expertise, and can contribute to solve the problem or identify the problem and minimize the business impact. So we start by looking at the business outcomes that the SAP technology is there to support, and that is both SAP and non-SAP applications talk seamlessly to each other, right? So we track the business metric that are going to indicate if there is a problem, and we can see the application performance in a varieties of a way that where exactly that problem causes and how we can fix it. So for example, if we might see that the dollar amount of orders being placed is lower than normal, and so we can drill down to that particular user journey over here and figure it out what is exactly causing that particular impact. Or alternatively, someone maybe want to do a more micro level monitoring, where they want to see the order to cash flow, and where the business process, where exactly the payments are failing more or errors are more than every other normal scenario, and why those errors are suddenly started increasing. So this kind of things where we can get into the more details, or we can map it to well, where you can drill down and figure out what exactly causing the issue. So each of these examples starts with the business metrics, allows you to drill down to still the user experience and the application performance, so that you can better prioritize your resolution, get into the root cause, and ultimately support the business outcomes. So we have built this aligned with all the major SAP business scenarios, like beginning with order to cash, and with the other many we are going to follow with that. So like procure to pay and so on. So by aligning these collected business metrics to the SAP business scenario, what we are doing here is to take guesswork out of this business and try to give the relevant data where you can try to isolate the problem or to solve the problem. Okay, so we talked about looking from a business perspective, but now let's look at from more a technical perspective, how to support those business outcomes. We mentioned that the SAP is a typical managed in a silo, but in the real world, these applications don't live in silo. We do real-time mapping all those interactions between these SAP and non-SAP applications, whereas you get a complete logical or the topological diagram of your particular business service, which is whether including SAP and non-SAP applications. And we automatically score each of every user transactions which is passing through that particular business service, and build a dynamic baseline for every metric in AppDynamics to detect and alert where the issue is actually happening. So for example, if someone is trying to put the order to pay journey, and he's trying to log in, and then he's trying to put more orders, and then he's trying to do the payment, and then he's trying to check out, right? So at any stage, if you see that that particular submitting order itself is having a problem, or the payment stage is having a problem, you can drill down and reach up to the last milestone or last of the code that where exactly causing the issue, right? And ultimately drill down to this. I mean, that helps you to drill down to the call stack, that is ABAP code stack, that give you the complete root cause analysis, that which is the line of ABAP code causing that issue at that point of time. And we are the only APM vendor that can provide this level of insight in ABAP code monitoring. So we have shown that from top to down approach to starting with these business outcomes, and then drilling into the applications. For SAP, it is also critical to monitor the health of underlying jobs and process that make the SAP landscape, right? So many other factors that may impact slowdown in the entire system performance, or either a single user performance for the entire SAP landscape. So for any IT personnel, it is very difficult to get into the root cause of that system slowdown and issues that which is coming outside the ABAP code, to figure it out what is the reason behind it and how to fix it. So by consistently monitoring and using the dashboards or to alert to the on-performance issues and slowdowns or other critical items, and mapping these customer journeys, it is something which is helpful. So we have numerous out-of-the-box dashboards which help you to maintain the availability and the data to help optimize the landscape. They show performance of things like background jobs, log statistics, database, app servers, and SAP Connects, or any log statistics or any particular worker process which is running in the background. We do provide some dashboards with which you can monitor each metric for them. And this applies to all the landscape of the health metrics, as well as so that everyone can have a detailed view of those health, and the landscape should be more proactive. Performance problems can be easily identified at any layer, whether it is a HANA query or whether it is a particular background jobs is not performing, or the log statistics is not working. We can give those complete visibility. So for example, if a particular HANA query is running slow, this can cause a slowdown in the overall system, and this can be identified and can be remediated before even it impacts all your customers. And this information is just not for the base system, by the way. It can be consumed by any other team members who can have the access to the tool, and they can help to minimize the impact of the business. So along with that, another important thing is the data storage, which is again a large driver of the cost related to maintaining or running the SAP. This might be relevant as a part of a migration scenario as well, and just in a day-to-day operations, proactively looking at how the growth of your data, that SAP data which is written in the database, on how you want to optimize the storage. AppDynamics can help you to identify those areas and with a better efficiency, and alert you that when you may need to kick off your housekeeping jobs to maintain the SAP or clean up those data and help the control cost and be efficient with your resources at any point of time. So, okay, now with this, we already seen that AppDynamics can help you to optimize the business outcomes. You can look at the application code, you can measure or monitor the entire landscape with the storage. And now the final use case which I will touch about is that the infrastructure, which is also, which touches and supports your SAP. AppDynamics can also help you to optimize and right-size your infrastructure footprint for this particular SAP environment. With built-in views and insight, the way you can see on the HANA SAP utilization or the disk utilization or overall server performance, we can give you the complete availability and the performance reports without with where you can decide how to provision and where you have to optimize it. So it's all about giving a holistic top-down approach for managing the SAP, and this is something which no one can give you at the detail and the depth level and the breadth of this particular visibility which AppDynamics does. So to summarize with the 3 points, what I will say is that with the AppDynamics for SAP, you can proactively monitor, get to the root cause of the SAP with the above code issues and remediate the problem. Second, understand how your SAP applications fit with your entire overall environment and the strategy by connecting the dots between SAP and non-SAP systems. And the third, most important, you can bring your IT and business teams together by trying business outcomes to application performance. Now let's look at this, what we have discussed now while looking at the demo. I have a few minutes of a demo where I can show you that how this is actually helping other customers as well. So the way you can see on the screen, this is our demo environment where we have SAP ERP system with NetGate here, and along with there are some Java, JVMs, and Node.js instances, or which I can say as a portal, the order portal system, which is integrating with the backend with the SAP ERP, right? And this is something which is a common scenario with the SAP portals where everyone has today, where they depends on their business environment. The point is, the way you can see on the screen, once we deploy our SAP and non-SAP agents within a minute, based on your real-time traffic or real-time user utilization of your applications, we discover your entire application landscape like this, or your entire business service like this. And not only that, we give you the, between the every hop that how much the response time is delivered, how many calls are going, and for each call, what is the response time you're delivering, and cumulatively, what is your entire application response time, and which is the component which is impacting all of this. Along with this, what we also do is that we discover all different type of business transactions, what we call as a business transaction, which is nothing but your type of transactions in your SAP and non-SAP systems, right? And not only that, we discover them, we allow you to analyze them individually, which gives you the performance that like any particular transaction, what is the response time, how many total calls at that point of time, how many concurrent calls every per minute, and out of that, how many are slow and errors, very, very slow and error, and so on, where you can read down further and figure out what is exactly happening to my that particular transactions, right? Along with that, the way I have seen that when the users are utilizing your SAP and non-SAP system, what we also provide that we monitor every business metric or every technical performance metric, and we create a dynamic baseline with that, right? So AppDynamics is the only solution who provides this dynamic baseline, which allows you to categorically figure out the transactions which evaluated against of that dynamic baseline. Any transaction goes beyond that dynamic baseline will be allow you to put in this particular transaction scorecard, which allows you to put in the different categories like the slow transactions, very slow transactions, and error. And not only that, you can further drill down and figure it out what is exactly happening to my that particular transaction, or because of that, how much is my overall application response time is going high, or whether my percentage of errors at that point of time is increasing, or it is as per the normal baseline, right? Now, with this, I will like to take one of the example of any particular business transaction which can help over here. So let's look at it the way every other health transactions of the health of the transaction, the health of the business is that something like a with a client API, which is a purchase order, right? So in this particular system, when there is a client API purchase order is a type of transaction which is touching the SAP and non-SAP system together. So you can see on the screen that the dedicated topological diagram of this particular purchase order as a type of transaction, right? And With that, we can analyze further that, figure it out that how many are the error transactions at any point of time. So at this point, you can train that around 3 p.m. or around 4 p.m. there is a few error transactions which has been produced in this particular type of transaction. To get into the more detail of this transaction, I can double click of any particular user transaction and figure out what's happening. On the next dashboard, I get a complete visibility of that particular user transaction, which is executed at 30th June for 1 p.m., right? And I can get a small dashboard on the left side, which tells me that what are the potential issues over here. I can click one of them and I can see there is an invalid order number has been got in the transaction, which is make this transaction failure, right? To get into the more detail, I can still drill down from here and get into the exact code level that what is happening in that particular my transaction. So the way it is started from my particular JVM, where I can see there is a POJO call at line number 32, which is called out which took almost more than 1 second and called out one web service call. When I click on this particular web service call, I can see that particular web service call is going to a ERP system, my SAP ERP system. And not only that, I can drill down further. The way I have seen in the JVM, that line of code, I can see in my ABAP code that which is the line which is taking highest amount of time. So in this case, the line number 102, this is a ZAP process underscore SO, which is taken more than 1 second. And this is how we can reach up to the ABAP code, which will help us to fix out what is the reason behind it. And not only that, we do have the data collector. So our same agents can collect more information for you, that what was that order ID which was inserted because of this transaction failed. Who was that user being used? What was the SAP ID, SAP client, or what was that particular web service information or the ZAP underscore process which being used to call out this transaction? So like this, we can collect more information which can help you to figure it out or narrow down the problem is with the SAP system or the non-SAP system. I hope that makes sense. Now with this, I simply want to show you that the similar manner you can drill down to any slow transaction of those purchase order as well, where you can figure it out. On the left side, there are many API calls or the HTTP calls which are being identified as a slow calls, which help you to drill down and figure out what is exactly happening. Or you can still drill down on this particular JVM and figure it out what's happening to that particular call or which is going to the SAP ERP system. And on a similar line, I can just drill down that web service call, which will take me to the SAP ERP system and give you the visibility of that particular ABAP code, right? So this is another RFC call with the proxy content, which is taken more than 1 second. And a similar manner, you can get a data collected, which is by the same agent, which is collected on the same transaction. And this is again a real-time data on the user, which was executed at 4:01 p.m. Does that make sense? So with this, what I want to quickly show you that the way you can analyze the ABAP codes and every other thing within the SAP system and non-SAP system, what we also talked about is that the out-of-box 24 DBI dashboards, right? So let's look at those dashboards and how that can be helped in this case. So I just gained into the ERP as my tier, and on that we do have this My Dashboard section where you will find all those out-of-box dashboards. So you can see this is the ERP application server CPU dashboard, which tells you that how is your infrastructure of that particular ERP application server is doing, how the CPU utilization trend is going, how is the IOs doing, how is the CPU utilized at the system or by the users at any point of time. But the most interestingly is that at any point of time, you can figure it out these 24 dashboards over here and select which of the dashboard which is related to that particular point by looking at the data. So let's look at the ERP RFC monitoring, where this RFC processes the work process which is consuming the data and how much time it is taking or where exactly the utilization going. At the same time, you can analyze the RFC runtime error on the same dashboard on the right side, where at any particular error which is executed at 3:37, I can double click and look at the more details of that particular error, right? And it gives me the complete custom event type, when exactly it is happened, which is the KPI name being traced, what time it is occurred, and what is the particular data being processed on that. So it is telling that in this case, no RFC authorizing for the function model RFCP. So like this, you can get a lot of data where you can figure out what is the particular call is impacting. So you can also look at this RFC statistics, where it tells you that the RFC queue entries, where when it is the in entries, which is not more than 15 minutes, which is almost zero, but the RFC out entries, which are more than 15 minutes, which are lagging always at every point of time. That is something, the input which can be taken at any point of time. You can you can completely segregate the RFC in inbound entries and outbound entries, and out of that, which one of them are impacting and how many are they impacting at any point of time. To analyze further, you can go on the right side and figure out the RFC errors as well, right? So along with that, let's look at it one more dashboard, which is nothing but which I will talk about the background jobs, because apart from your SAP systems, which is interacting with your order processing or any front-end applications, these background jobs are something which is most important, which keep running at any point of time in the background, right? And this may lead to at any point of time, like processing the mass invoices, right? And that can be the one of the critical background job while concurrently running with other jobs as well. So you can analyze overall the performance of your background worker process utilization, problematic background jobs, and how the trend is going, that how many performance or problematic background jobs are created. Within that, you can analyze that, which is, let's look at the mass process, right? So something mass process, what I was referring to, and there is always a time limit to process those particular invoices, right? So let's say the limit is 5 minutes. You can see the details when it is failed, right? And it can be marked as a fail. And not only that, it gives out how much exactly time being taken, right? And what amount of records being processed, what is the job number, every other details being captured over here, right? And not only that, you can configure with our alert and help section, you can create a policy when this kind of mass processing jobs are getting failed. You can configure email alert and alert the respective people that this type of processing jobs are getting failed and they need to take a real immediate action, right? So this is how you get, apart from the above code visibility, you can get into your background jobs as well, right? Now, by looking at the out-of-the-box dashboards and monitoring all the end-to-end visibility on your SAP and non-SAP system, what we also provide you that giving you a custom dashboard visibility, right? And this is one of the sample example of our SAP dashboard, which is many of the customers using it. Like you can see the multiple different metrics has been put on a single dashboard. So you can see on the top there is a business transactions or the business user journey, where users are coming on the portal for the request. They get the get user details. They put on the purchase order. They get the order records, and then they put the sales order processing perspective. So at any stage, if there is any problem, the way this particular thing is shown as red color over here, that purchase order, you can read down further to figure out what is happening in my purchase order, which we have seen in looking at the purchase order section, right? Along with that, you can see you are monitoring your overall application KPIs, that how many slow calls, how many are very slow calls, the overall health of your platform. But the most important, you can at that point when you are looking at the business journey, you can right there you can figure out how your ERP servers performance. What is the response time? How many the error rates are that, right? And the ERP servers, like how many the shutdowns, how many the active user, is there any SAP logs being created? Are there any RFCs being waiting? So every other different metrics which we have seen so far, we can bring it on a single dashboard. And the most important thing, the IDOCs, right? The IDOCs, which is like inbound IDOCs and outbound IDOCs, you can have the complete analysis over here to figure it out how the IDOCs are being error in inbound errors and the outbound errors. And the way you can see here, you can track at every minute in a real time that how many IDOC errors are blocking your sales order volume, right? And you can also compare with your previous day that in this particular period of time, in last 2 hours, there is more than 4% is more data rate compared to last day, right? And not only that, you can drill down over here and figure it out the detailed view of your IDOC monitoring. And this particular dashboard, again, a part of a custom dashboard where you can bring all the data that what is the document type which is most failing, what are the what are the error code, which is the maximum error code being thrown for this IDOC while inbound IDOCs, right? What is the status message? What is the type of particular IDOC message? Same thing with outbound. You can categorically figure out what are the failures of those particular IDOC outbound errors. So this is how you can get into the more visibility, and this is again a real time. You can analyze this data by SAP system or the non-SAP system or the DevOps team to help each other and figure it out or minimize the business impact. All right. So with this, I am quickly want to touch base with one of our customer success story. So this is the example of one of our retail customer, and it is nothing but a global athletic apparel manufacturer who was having an issue with their inventory management system. And they did not have any kind of a holistic views to understand if this was happening inside or SAP or somewhere else, and this was causing a multiple war room situation. With AppDynamics, they were able to reduce the number of issues and the duration of issues related to the inventory management system, right? And with this, they are able to save around $4.5 million annual cost, utilizing the resource time. Also, they were able to reduce the amount of time of the application whenever the application was down or if the application is slow. So this kind of events were reduced by 70%, and that attributed to they saved around $4 million to improve their end user by improving their end user productivity, rather than the P1 and P2 resources and involved in those kind of tickets. The resources were started using the time where more productive way, right? And while using the AppDynamics, the most important thing what they are able to do is that they are finally able to protect additional 750K revenue. They are protecting their revenue by minimizing the impactful transactions at every annual year. I hope that helps all of you, and I would like to pause over here and hand over to Sanatan for the question turnaround. Thanks for your attending this. Over to you, Sanatan.
Thanks, Avijit. I think we have a few questions there in the Q&A window. So let's start with a few questions there. I'll read out the question. Maybe first question is maybe Abhijit or Jody, you can answer. Will this solution work for SAP ECC? That's a question that has come in.
Yeah, I was literally typing a response to that as you asked it out loud. Yeah, absolutely. The specific solution that Abhijit presented today is specifically built for NetWeaver ABAP-based systems. So that includes R3, S4, and any ancillary systems built on that application server. So absolutely, that supports it, and that goes in addition to all the other native languages we support, like Java, .NET, etc.
Great. I think it's a kind of a universal question that we come across. So we have a question which asks that I believe this is SAP approved. So I've already responded, but Jody, you want to kind of add to that so that most of the people have this question that whether it is SAP approved or not. So you want to add to that?
Yeah, definitely. It is certified by SAP officially, and not only I think AppDynamics carries a partnership with SAP, Cisco. Obviously, AppDynamics being a part of Cisco has a platinum level partnership with Cisco or with SAP as well. So we tick all the boxes.
Excellent. Another question. I think there are 3 questions. I'll combine them. One of our attendees says you have nicely explained for application monitoring, but how to avoid hardware failure outage. And the same person is asking, considering systems in HA plus DR, how to improve RPO and TRO, and obviously he has requested for a demo.
Yeah, look, I think we'd probably have to dive into that offline and see exactly what use cases are in play there for the infrastructure, and specifically around the HA and DR deployments. I mean, we definitely, as Apogee showed in the demo, we definitely pull in metrics from the infrastructure, all the usual suspects like CPU, memory, et cetera, et cetera. So if that data is going to be in AppD, so you can alert on it and see it and dashboard it and everything. But just that specific use case around DR and HA, yeah, we could take that offline and talk about that separately.
Perfect. Another question is, monitoring of application server and replication monitoring is available for HANA. I think it's a question whether it is available or not.
Yes, all this works on HANA, definitely.
Great. Is licensing done through SFP as SAP partner? That's a question.
No, licensing is done with AppDynamics. for the agent itself.
Yep. Can we compare SAP with SAP Solution Manager? A common question that we have.
Well, I wanted to back up real quick. I think we skipped one. I want to make sure the Fiori application. So just real quick on the Fiori question. Yes, absolutely. AppD, the end-to-end monitoring encompasses that browser end user experience. Obviously, Fiori is a browser-based application. We have an end user monitoring feature that is absolutely compatible with Fiori, that gives you the data around where they're, from where are they accessing the systems, the type of browsers, the buttons they're clicking, the web requests that are being made, and we're able to tie that together end to end to see that, this request from a browser ends up requiring this execution of code in the backend system. So absolutely, yes, we do support Fiori. And then going to Solution Manager, we have 3 minutes left. I'll just say this. It's not an us versus Solution Manager discussion. It never is, it never will be. Solution Manager is very, very powerful and does so many more things than just monitor applications and landscapes. AppDynamics is very, very powerful when it comes to monitoring alone. So we typically say it's an us and Solution Manager conversation. We talk about where we can enhance Solution Manager. If you use Solution Manager as an ITSM tool, we can even feed alerts into Solution Manager if needed. But the real value is that AppDynamics is something that can be deployed in days and weeks, not months and months and even years in SAP units of measure. So the value that Solution Manager may be able to provide with significant effort and time and money, we can do that in a very short period of time. But again, our focus is on the monitoring piece and nothing else.
Yeah, one interesting question, very different. Which part of SAP does AppDynamics solution not cover? Very interesting.
I have no idea. I don't know. I'm not an SAP expert. But look, with anything, with AppDynamics, like it doesn't, we always we prefer to go in and do these proofs of values because we want to understand where your customers, where your US customers, where your pain is, where you need help when it comes to monitoring, where there's issues with the system. And then we do an investigation, like what's being offered with this, with QK, and look at, what parts of AppDynamics can potentially be used to solve those problems. And we're very specific when we go in, and we agree upon what we need to accomplish with these proof of concepts, proof of values, and we do a technical deep dive as part of that to look at the system itself, the SAP landscape, and say where do we think AppDynamics can be installed, and where can it actually help.
Thanks, Jody. We have a question asking, does AppDynamics support the SAP analysis for Office?
I actually don't know the answer to that. I'd have to get back to you that separately or as a follow-up.
Sure, no problem. I think maybe we are on the top of the hour. The last question is, which is a very valid question, is this a deployment model on-premise or cloud? So I think, Jody, you can maybe take a minute on that.
So 2 parts to that. AppDynamics itself is predominantly a SaaS product. So the collector that Abhijit walked you through, that showed the stitching together of all the different systems, that UI, that's a predominantly SaaS hosted application that we maintain. The second part to that is where can we deploy the agents? So some of you might be deploying SAP on-prem or Azure or HANA Enterprise Cloud. We can support all of that as long as you have the capability to import transports, which is the form our agents take. Then absolutely you can leverage AppDynamics.
Great. We are on the top of the hour. Thanks, Jody. Any other question? You can type in. Otherwise, thanks for attending today's session. Just a reminder, we will be sending the feedback survey to all of you. We'll request if you can fill in the feedback survey, and that will also help you to get in touch with us to discuss this further. There are a few requests for doing a POC or doing a demo. We will get in touch with you individually to take it forward. Again, it was a pleasure to host all of you today. Thanks a lot, and we will be doing such sessions in future as well. So on behalf of Cisco AppDynamics and QualityKiosk, I thank you all, and I think we can close the session. Thank you.